Nice. I was just thinking, doesn't like Udit look like Velma from Scooby-Doo?
He does, doesn't he?
Ouch! Jinkies!
A little bit of John Wick in there too.
John
There's a
Wick
little bit of
Velma.
John Wick in there too.
John Wick across Velma. That's a weird imagination. Um,
I mean, John Wick wears a turtleneck in the first one.
Right.
Anyway, welcome guys. Welcome to the 13th episode of the Bongshot podcast. I'm Aman. Joining me is of course Udit, and we have a special guest today, Rahul Sehgal. So, as you guys know, this is the best gaming podcast, obviously, in this country, and that's why we have the best guests in this country for video games. We have Rahul Sehgal. He's where do I start? This guy has been mini inspiration for me ever since I found out about him. He has a history of going out as a mariner for a few years, just sailing the seas and everything. And the pictures I've seen, oh my god.
Very interesting to see how he got into game design.
Yeah, we will get there. How a mariner gets into game design. I'll definitely ask you. He has published his own game, which we'll talk about long back actually, which came out on PC and Steam as well, I believe. And now he teaches for the last few years. He's been teaching at Backstage Pass, which is one of the better institutions to learn video game design in the country. So welcome, Rahul. Tell us if I was okay with the introduction or...
Yes, all good. Yes. I also have to pay the rent. So primarily what I do is I have a job. I have a day job, and I am creative lead of a studio that makes casino games. So
Right.
That's my day job, and everything else is moonlighting, basically.
Right. It's still the very nice moonlighting.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot of moonlight in there, Yeah, so I do that a lot.
So Rahul, please tell us your story of who you are. If I missed out on anything, you said you're a studio head as well. What is it like to be a casino mobile gaming studio head? Like, what's the
Not
day job like?
not in mobile. So I'll tell you what it's like.
Okay.
So around 5 years ago, I was doing my own thing. I was teaching, at Backstage Pass, and I was making my own game and by myself, and that's kind of hard. And then I got a call from HR in a company in casino, and he got my number from Backstage Pass, and they needed someone to kind of help out with design. Because honestly, the design team in every game studio is usually very complicated, so to speak. It generally, if you don't have someone who's kind of like this benign dictator, everything goes to shit. Design and art in game studios is particularly known for that. So he called me and said, "Hey man, like we need your help a little bit with design at our company." And so I said, "What kind of games do you make?" He's like, "We make casino games." And in my mind, I was like, "Ew, casino." And so I said, "So how much does the job pay?" And then he told me, and I'm like, "Okay, what time should I be there?"
Right.
So, and then I joined this company just kind of as a consultant for a couple of hours. And then they said, can you do it for 4 hours? Can you do it for 5 hours? Can you go full time?
Right.
And that's it. So I have been, and the casino games I work on are online, the browser-based games. Right. And I can't really talk very much about it because it's kind of hush-hush a little bit, but you can find out everything about me, okay? But I can't really talk so much about it. But I do work in casino games, and casino games is generally people playing slot games, people playing roulette, people playing blackjack, etc. Not in India, but in Europe and the US. So what I do is I run a team of designers and artists and we make those games. We make something like between 20 and 30 games a year, and those games make fantastic sums of money. That's all I'm going to say. So that's kind of what I do during the day.
Right.
And apart from that, I have my own company, which I founded almost like 8-9 years ago. Now has pivoted from purely to making games to education and mentoring and consultancy. So Roach Interactive, more than actually making games, is now into education and mentoring and consultancy.
Right.
And what I also do is, of course, I teach at game colleges. So I teach at Vellore Institute of Technology, Bhopal. I teach at Backstage Pass, and I teach at Srishti Bangalore. I teach them game design, production, mentoring, and I run student projects. So a bunch of kids wants to make a game. I'll be like, okay, let's do this. Let's make a game.
Right.
That's what I do at the moment.
Rahul, one interesting point that you stressed on that I wanted to elaborate, which many people might not know. When it comes to games, most people have a vague idea that they think that the game designer is kind of like the director or etc. And there is a hierarchy in game development that depends on the kind of game that players are making. But it's like based on that, even the role of where the game designer fits also might be different, right? If certain times where the project manager might take more hold on certain projects, or a game director basically directs, game director basically guides the designers. Hierarchies might be different from different projects.
Yes.
So could you basically throw more light on them based on the projects that you've worked, and how maybe the roles of game designers also have changed a bit?
Right. So it depends a lot on the studio. It depends a lot on the genre. In India, generally, if you look at games, I'll be honest, mostly it's mobile games. And mobile games are usually like there's one game which is made on day X, and that game starts working, and then it's just live ops for years.
Right.
So it's just live ops. Like there's a game which works, and that game just goes on for years and years and years and years and years. So there's no real game design. It's more feature design. It's more you're designing a new component of that game. You know what I mean? That's the way in India. But abroad, for example, and it also depends on how complex the design of that game is. So if there's a game that's being made, which is a very complex role-playing game or a MOBA or something which is really design heavy, then obviously the lead designer at that game is going to have all the power and all the say on that game. So who runs the game depends on who has the heaviest role and the heaviest responsibility. So for a mobile game, that is pretty much all about numbers, and you're releasing something, you're looking at the numbers, and you're tweaking something else and releasing a new feature. If that's what it's about, then obviously the producer or the project manager on a mobile game project is going to be the authority, and the game designer is just going to be kind of like doing something small. But in the West, mostly, a lead designer is literally all powerful at a game studio. And I would imagine that for a game like Raji, or a game which has genuinely good art, genuinely good design, and heavy level design, especially like game like Raji has amazing level design. I would imagine that the designer, the lead designer of that project of that studio would have a lot more responsibility and a lot more to say in the making of that game. So it depends. It depends on the complexity of the game.
Right. I want to say something. Just before we go into deep, I want to set the stage for people who are listening and watching this video. So, like I said, Rahul has been teaching about video games at Backstage Pass in multiple places actually. And your studio, Roach Interactive, has also gone into consultation and teaching, like you said, right?
Yes.
But one of the more recent interesting things that you've done, actually, it just ended yesterday, which is IGDC, which is something that's been happening for years now. I believe it started in 2008 or something.
Yeah, I came to Hyderabad in 2010. So 2009 was the first one. It was called NGDC. It was National Game Developer Conference at that time,
Right.
and it was just like 50 people
Right.
in a lounge in a hotel in Hyderabad. And
Right.
I missed the first one because I was in Vancouver at the time. But the second one, I was there. Like I was there in
Right.
Hyderabad in 2010, the year I arrived in Hyderabad, and it's grown and it's grown and it's grown and it's grown and it's
Yeah.
grown. So
So
yeah.
that's what I want to point out. Like, you've been in the game development cycle of this country for some time now, right?
Yeah.
And you've also seen it grow from, I would say, in the nascent stages. And IGDC right now, as it's called, Indian Game Developer Conference, is also backed by Unreal. Before this, it was backed by Unity and Google previously. And I think I first met you online in this forum for NASCOM Game Development's forum in Facebook, I believe. I think that's where we started talking. And it's been we've been like in touch ever since. So just tell us a little bit about, because most of my viewers are gamers, like they're core gamers, they play all kinds of games, but they might not know about the game design industry of the country, right? Or the game development industry of the country, I would say, right? Design would be, like you said, more specific. And I just want you to give a glimpse to the average layman. Like, imagine someone has just grown up playing Skyrim, nothing else. And what would you describe IGDC in the shortest way possible? And what is your role over there right now?
Okay, so IGDC is obviously the India Game Developers Conference, and everyone in India who is involved in the game industry in one way or the other comes together at the India Game Developer Conference. It's a meeting point for everyone to get together once a year and network, A, B, share knowledge, 3, drink beer and talk to your old friends. So the India Game Development Conference, it happens once a year, and everybody from studio heads to designers to artists to writers to data people, everyone turns up at one place. And what happens is that you have different tracks at the conference. So there is, depending on disciplines, you have a room which will be the game design track, in which speakers will be talking about game design. So they will be talking about their experiences making games. Then there'll be another for game production. So there will be people talking about production and what it's like to produce games and their experiences. They'll be sharing knowledge, sharing information, sometimes, upselling themselves. It happens a lot. And then I curate the careers track. So my job every year is to make sure that the people who come into the conference who want to break into the game industry, people who've, like students and people like you mentioned, Amit has played Skyrim only and is wondering how do you get into game development? So I have a track in which I will get speakers who talk about how to do art. I had a talk about game career strategy, how to break into the industry, how to make your first game. So there are all these tracks which you can go. You can sit in a room and there'll be like a person on stage with a slideshow talking about things, and you can ask questions and all that kind of thing. So it's a fantastic place to start if you want to break into the game industry. Absolutely brilliant. And to take a step back a little bit, you talked about the Indian game industry. So the Indian game industry, I would say now it's closing on to $1 billion. We have, I think, like 30,000 people employed in the game industry in India as such. And it's a mix of, at one end, you have Electronic Arts and you have Ubisoft, which have these really big and fancy studios where, you have pinball and you have vending machines and you have cool decor, but they work basically on outsourcing, essentially. And then at the other end, you have these like 5 guys in a room, sweating bullets, trying to release the next big hit, which is basically like Raji. So you have a mix of big studios, small studios, you have indies, you have outsourcing studios, you have mobile game studios, mostly mobile game studios, but you also have a few indies. And last year, interesting is I went to Brazil because my wife is from there. Okay, and I went to this thing called Gamescom. So it was a gamers. It was not a conference. It was an expo. Okay, and I went over there, and like I was blown away. I mean, games in Brazil is massive. It's huge. And 99% of the people who came for that conference, it was not a conference, it was expo, were players who wanted to check games out. They don't have a games industry there. Like the only game industry they have is indies. India are because we are outsourcing. We used to be an outsourcing hub. So what happened was that 5 or 10 years ago, from the West, they started outsourcing game art and game development to India. So in the beginning, all these studios that started off in the game industry were all outsourcing studios, right? There was no creative work. And at some point, taking baby steps, we started making our own games. Studios, you know what? Why don't we try making a game by ourselves? So we went from purely being a service provider for games to actually making games in our own. And in the last 10 years, we've come a long way. But when you look at the game industry in India, you have to realize that in the DNA of the game industry is this service provider outsourcing DNA, which is there in the industry. And for someone purely creative, that can be kind of frustrating at times when you see that. Like sometimes I said, dude, you're talking about software. We're not developing software. We're developing games. It's not the same.
Right.
So yeah. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. But I want to just have a small follow-up question to that as well. You said IGDC has been a place for game designers or game developers from across the country to come and meet, have beer, network, and all that, right? And I believe you guys also played a lot of games. Like I saw last year you guys were playing Settlers of Catan, which is like a board game, I believe. I don't know if that's last year or before that, but I remember you guys, every game developer, like most of the game developers who go at IGDC tend to at least partake in board games. That's one of the place I can see board games being celebrated, and I can understand why, because game design comes from all of this, right, at the end of the day. But this year has been very different because of COVID. All of this has been online. There's no networking. Beer drinking has been happening in home from 8 o'clock in the morning. And people haven't been able to meet. How has IGDC changed, or rather I should say, how was IGDC conducted this year? What is the future of IGDC? I believe I don't see COVID ending anytime soon, right? And did you guys, because you're one of the people behind, at this point you're one of the, I could safely say you're one of the core people behind IGDC, right? So how do you think IGDC is going to go forward? What are the learning moments that you have learned? And one thing I want you to mention before getting on the discussion is IGDC was held online this time. Can people go and watch these videos or conferences online? Is it on a YouTube website? Where can they watch it? Yeah.
Okay, so I'll answer the last one first. Yes, definitely. So all the sessions were recorded. I think they were. I actually forgot to hit the record button for a couple of months.
But they were live streamed.
They were live streamed, but the recordings, you can actually go, and the organizers will put it out there soon. I think it'll be up on YouTube or something. So all the talks will be, at least the ones that the organizers remembered to record, will be up there on YouTube. So not to worry, you'll be able to see almost everything that happened at IGDC really, really soon. So I'll tell you what's interesting about IGDC for me is that, of course, I've been seeing it for a long time. It went to Pune for a few years, and then in Hyderabad, we kind of managed to get it back to Hyderabad for a long time. The interesting thing is that, you have at a game conference, you have one place which is where you have the talks, which are just basically a bunch of rooms with a stage and chairs. Right? That's one part of the conference. And the other part is the expo floor. So the expo floor is this huge hall, which is really exciting. It is really, really exciting for even a gamer to go, because you walk into the expo and it's crazy. You have all these stalls. You have people who are releasing their own games. You have big companies. You have Electronic Arts, and you can go and play these games. You have VR booths where of course, you have to stand in line, and you can like put on the VR headset and you can play games. You have people from all over the world showing off games. Like I remember I was playing a game which was for differently abled people, in which the controller was a cushion. So you could like hold a cushion in front of you and you would squeeze that cushion and you would play a game. And it was actually fun. And I played that game. And esports is getting really, really big. I mean, it was almost annoying for me. The last time I went to the expo, there were these 2 or 3 huge stages, and they were like people screaming, and it was crazy. And I was like, dude, this is so loud. You know what I mean? Esports has kind of really taken over the expo floor in IGDC. Of course, this year it wasn't there, but last year I was like, whoa, what is this? There were actually 2 or 3 different tournaments going on at the same time.
Right.
So it's this very exciting place, man. You walk in there, if you're a gamer, and like the hairs stand up on your hand when you walk into the expo floor, and you just like, you have sensory overload the first day because there's so much going on. And you're running around like a headless cockroach. Should I see this? Should I do that? Should I play this game? Should I do this? Oh my God. Like the first day, you're just running around overloaded with information. And then you go back and, okay, tomorrow I'm going to go and play that game. And I'm going to go and check out that stall. And I'm going to go and do this. And on the second day, you can actually go and do stuff. So it's very exciting, man. It's very exciting.
So going on that itself, right? Previously, IGDC was never a free thing. This is the first time it's been free for everyone, I believe, right? And I don't believe previous lectures from the past few years were also publicly available.
Oh, yeah. They're all up on YouTube, free of cost.
Okay. So
there's an IGDC channel. There's an IGDC channel on YouTube, and all the talks are there, free of cost.
From all past events as well?
Yes. As far as I know, because I mean, I think only about 2 or 3 years ago, they got organized enough to like record all the talks. And then it's a pain, right? Because we are doing it for free. We're not getting paid. The organizers are literally working hundreds of hours organizing this conference, and we're not getting paid. Like I have to, every year in about October, November, I have to put in literally between 50 and 100 hours of work because you have to invite speakers, you have to coordinate with them, and you have to like talk to them. It's a lot of work, and we do it for free. We do it because we want the community to come up, and slowly it's getting more organized. So because to hire someone who actually does the video recording, then take that talk and upload it on YouTube and tag it and everything, it's happened. It started happening just for 2 or 3 years now, but it's happening now. We're getting more and more organized.
Right. IGDC has never been a very consumer-oriented event rather than it was a developer-focused event. Do you see it becoming like a commercially viable thing like, say, Gamescom or PAX in the future?
You see, that's a great question. And that's happening now because gamers and gaming in India it's like this supernova, which is just going boom. And I'll tell you why it's happening. Because till about 3 or 4 years ago, old people like me who used to play gulli danda in our childhood were running the industry. Okay. And now that's changing. It's people like you guys. It's people like, it's 20-year-olds who have been brought up playing games. Like gamers are getting into the game industry.
Right.
Okay. And kids are playing games, right? I mean, so all of a sudden, the player base in India of people who play games and pay for games. We were mostly a culture that played pirated games on PCs, and that's changed now. People are actually buying consoles.
I mean,
people are buying games.
That's also partly because free-to-play games back 10 years before weren't a thing, right? Like, it was much less of a thing than it is today, I would believe.
That's also because
it didn't exist. It didn't exist.
Accessibility has increased.
Yeah.
So the player base in India has massively increased, which means that when you go to IGDC, obviously it makes sense for people to come in there and for players to come in there. So I mean, it will always be a developer conference, but the expo is all about getting the players in there and exposing them to Indian games and the Indian gaming ecosystem. And that's getting like 2019. I was shocked when I looked at the expo floor. I had never seen it like that. So definitely it's getting bigger, that part of it. That is where people who actually play games are coming in, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And definitely, I think it's on its way to being, commercially sustainable for sure.
Interesting.
Now, I would like to get down from there, from GDC to actually GD, which is game development.
Right.
The process in India. But before that, I want to actually focus more on the design thing, because this is something I've been trying to elaborate through the past 3 episodes with the past 3 guests we have had, and which I believe more people need to know. Because when people think about game design, they immediately go to, studying more about Unity or more about Unreal and more about any technical software. But what I believe most people don't understand is for a game designer, these skills are there, but it's more importantly the soft skills, which are mainly like things like communication, technical writing,
Okay, so there's a lot of terminology confusion.
Right.
Okay, in the West, when you say game developer, the term game developer means anybody who is involved with the development of a game. Right. So when you say when you say, if someone says there's a bunch of us and we are game developers. Now, developing a game is the entire process of making a game, which has several components. The first one is designing a game. Like, what is this game going to be? Like, before you even write a line of code, you have to ask yourself, what are we making? Right? So that is the design part. So the design is figuring out what the hell you're going to make. How is it going? What is the storyline going to be? What is the narrative going to be? What are the mechanics going to be? Right? That is design. Design has nothing to do with writing a single line of code. Zero. So when you say purely game design, it is documentation. So a game designer has the game playing in his or her head, right? So if you're a game designer, you can close your eyes and you're playing the finished product. The problem is that vision has to then be transmitted to all these people who are going to be writing the code, right? So let's split up the game development process into game design, game art, and game programming. Game design, game art, game programming. Right? So when you say game design, it is having the idea in your head, writing the documentation, making a game design document, putting mock-ups of the screen, saying, okay, the HUD is going to be here, the jump button is going to be here. Oh, no on-screen jump buttons. Like, this is going to be the health bar, this is going to be the screen, this is going to be the menu, this is what happens in the game. Once you reach this level, once you get so much XP, you level up to this level. That's what the game designer does. And the game designer says, all right, Mr. Programmer, here's the game design document. Can you please make this? And he takes the document and he puts it on the screen and he opens Unity and he starts writing the code to actually program the game. To make things worse, in India, when people say game developer, they mean game programmer.
Yes.
It's an Indian thing. In India, when you say, I'm a game developer, they mean game programmer. So it's super confusing. So that's what it is. Right. I hope I managed to explain that.
No, yeah. That made perfect sense, actually.
So again, going on the Indian part, is Aman will know before joining the before becoming a game designer, I was a writer before that. And before becoming a game designer, I was very enthusiastic about games. I used to love video games. But if Aman talks to me right now, uh, I've been in mobile game development, and I would tell him like, I hate video games. I'm not excited about anything. I hate going to conventions. I do not like gaming communities. I do not want to interact with another gamer. If somebody says video games are good, I want to just tell them that their life is a lie. So could you explain how does one grow from being super enthusiastic to being super cynical, or is it just me?
No, man. You're absolutely true. It's what happens is that you've looked under the hood,
Right.
right? You've looked under the hood, and that's what happens to people is that when you play games, you're a gamer. Like and when you have to start making games, you have to figure out yourself as a player first. So you have to be like, why was I having so much fun with that game? And then you have to find out the tricks as to how the designer hooked you and tricked you, played a mental trick into you with you to actually like playing that game. And then you look at it and you feel used a little bit, say, oh, that's why I was having so much fun. That's why I played this game till 4 a.m. and I didn't sleep. And my girlfriend broke up with me because I was playing. That's why all this happened. It was a trick. It was a dirty trick it was a psychological trick that some designer played on me. So for a while, you're just like, my life has been a lie. You have to, you look through the veil. You get literally disillusioned, right? But I didn't go through that because I started teaching. So straight off the bat, I had to deconstruct the entire process of psychological manipulation that video games essentially are. Like people get shocked when I say this, but a video game is software manipulating your emotions using sprites, right? Very early, I saw through the veil and I was like, okay, so this is what it's all about, and I'm fine with that. So I kind of got used to that very much pretty early on. But it's very, very normal that you love video games and then you get into game development and then you go through this phase where you are like, oh my God, and you lose the mystique. Video games lose their mystery, but it comes back. It comes back. I promise you. If you don't force it, just leave it be. And one day it will come back. I promise you. It'll come back slowly. It'll come back with a small game that you like. You will start to love video games once again, but just let it come to you. Don't worry about it. Let it go. If you love something, set it free. If it comes back to you, if it's yours.
It's one of those arcs, right? Like in Spider-Verse, it's Peter Parker who's just lost all hope in everything, and he has to like learn to get back.
It's like there's this. I have become I've become a realist in the sense that I've kind of been through the entire circle of making my own game and releasing it and having views that people who didn't play video games were kind of like a step below me, or people who played mobile games were somehow not real gamers. And then all my illusions and all my prejudices have been completely shattered one by one. And so at this point, I've stopped judging. Like I've stopped judging when people completely rip off a game and $1 million and make $1 million. I'm like, okay, so I've gone past that thing of judging people and games and gamers, and I try to be just like this observer that sees what's going on. So you do get very cynical when you join the game industry, but it's a phase. If you go through it, you will get your mojo back.
I think it's similar to how Anurag Kashyap does not like Bollywood.
Oh, dude, that's different. I mean, like, Yeah, that's
Just making a
More
joke.
Alan Moore, I think.
Anyway, this is a nice segue into the topic that I wanted to discuss with you. Since you said you are into the job of like teaching game development to others, I wanted to specifically discuss what is, or rather, what is teaching video games like in general. Like, I think you'll have a very different perspective than most people, because like I don't know I don't know. Okay, before I should give some context to this, I believe, right? Technically speaking, I know more game developer teachers. Technically speaking, like it's in the title, but they're not. Do I say that? Because I tried learning game design when I was young, and for me, game design, I've been into gaming ever since I was like a kid, right? I was ever since I was 5 years old, I was into video games, and I knew some way or somehow I wanted to, if not gaming, I wanted to do something with the computer, right? And then in 2005, 6, 7, I saw billboards and stuff popping up of things like Mac Arena, where they said, they'll teach game design. And I even went, after I came to Calcutta in 2011, I believe I joined Mac in 2013. And I did it for a year. And that wasn't game design. For me, that was modeling, specifically asset creation. Specifically asset creation, nothing more than that, right? So if you count the teachers I met there as game designers, maybe like if whoever is listening, then yeah, I know more. But technically, like again, like I don't, in the realist sense, I don't know anyone who has been teaching video games for as long as you have, right? And so what's the experience like in general, and what are your thoughts about other what is your thoughts about other institutions in India?
So here's the thing, right? Now, when you look at game development is like this iceberg. All right, think of an iceberg with 10% of it above water.
Right.
So the 10% above water that everyone can see is Unity or Unreal, game art, and an idea.
Right.
So if you ask someone, hey, or even on the internet, like, what's game development? Oh, you have to come up with an idea. You have to make art. You have to use Unity or Unreal, and you make a game engine, right? The 90% of the iceberg that's below the water is the business of the game, the pre-production, the player research, the product management, all that stuff, the testing, all that stuff. So 90% of the game dev iceberg is below water.
Right.
And what most game institutes in India do is that they just focus on that top 10% of the iceberg.
Yeah, I think it's because of mostly marketing reasons. It's more easier to convince someone when you tell them. It's just like a two-step process to get into game design. Like you're in.
It's not just in India. Like worldwide, game schools have a bad reputation.
Okay.
Game schools and game courses have a genuinely bad reputation because the vast majority of them are absolute shit. Okay. And you just go in there and be like, hey man, that's Unity on that computer. Go. Ta-da! And that's literally it. That's literally most game institutes in India. And so they have a bad reputation, deservedly so. The few that do teach good games, they tackle the entire spectrum of game making. They will teach you pre-production, they will teach you game development, they will teach you narrative, they will teach you optimization, they'll teach you art. Like there's so many disciplines. There's so many disciplines in there's so many aspects of game making that you need to understand, right? That's one aspect. A genuine problem is that people who work in the West, most game colleges are in the evening, because what happens is that people like me who work at game studios till 5 p.m. then go to school and teach them.
Right.
So it means that you are being taught by people who are actually making games.
Right.
I've seen institutes where the head of game design is some dude who got a degree in something 10 years ago and has never made a game in his life. And he's the head of the gaming faculty and he's never made a released game.
In India, no? Or is it like outside also?
It's in India 99%, in outside 30 to 40%.
Right. Okay.
You know what I mean? So generally there are all these academics that know a lot of theory about gaming and etc., but they've never been in a studio. They've never made a game that has released and made a cent. Okay, it's because there's a genuine shortage of it. They're not there. I mean, this is the reason I have a startup called Up Your Game, in which I teach this stuff. I mentor people. I'm like, listen, what you don't, watching tutorials on the internet is just one part of it, but you need someone to tell you the process of just pre-production. How do you come up with an idea? How do you scope a project? How do you market your game? How do you make an asset list? How do you see your target market? How do you figure out player psychology? All this stuff. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the situation where it's at. I forgot the remaining part of your question.
I actually wanted to tackle this one question, which very few people do, which many professional companies also get wrong, which is the importance of pre-production in game development, right? Because what many people don't realize is the way of creating games is not less similar to filmmaking, but more to do with animation studios, where you have a large amount of staff that is employed, and every time you are making decisions, the main focus of the head is to make sure that he's making optimum use of all the people that are employed, right? So what happens is, while there is pre-production, you either have the programmers working on previous projects. If not, they're sitting idle, right? So what happens is, when people are starting lot of projects completely new, they want to get through with the pre-production as fast as possible, right? So that the artists, the programmers have something to do and run with. But that's where most of the errors happen, right? Because you've skipped the stage which
you nailed it.
For fixing the most. So I wanted your opinion to shed light on this phase.
No, dude, you absolutely nailed it. Okay, pre-production is the part where, like, if you're making a building, pre-production is when you're digging the foundation. Okay, right. It's not sexy. It kind of sucks because you're not doing anything. You're just sitting there with a bunch of people and talking about stuff. You're saying, so pre-production is basically you have to ask and answer 3 questions. A, why are we making this game? Like, why are we making this game? B, what are we making? And 3, how are we going to? So it's like the what, it's the why, the what, and the how. Okay. And so in pre-production is when you're just talking and you're writing and you're making documentation and you make sketches and maybe you're making a prototype. Because the thing with creative people, we want to do. We are not planners. We are not organized. Like, our first instinct is to just get on our computers and start building shit. Like, we hate the organization, the writing down, the planning, the sticky notes, the product management software. It's just, oh my God, it's horrible. Okay. So pre-production is when you do all that stuff, right? And it's super, super, super important. But it's kind of irritating because nobody's doing anything. And honestly, if someone's paying salaries, they'll be like, Bhaiya, what are we paying you for? Go and make some art. No, what are you sitting looking at my face for? So it's really difficult to not do anything and just keep quiet until pre-production is over. And then you say, okay, now let's make this. Let's actually make this. But the truth is that if you don't have a good pre-production, your project is going to crash and burn. I have seen it So many times I have seen it. So I've literally seen hundreds of game projects that have crashed and burned because people didn't ask themselves these three questions: why, what, and how. Okay, it's a big bug with me, and I keep telling everyone that the unsexy, the boring part, the underneath part of the iceberg is going to sink you if you don't know about it. And a big part of that is pre-production.
Right. So on that topic, it's like the why, what, and how. And if you could explain how that process differs when you're working in the mobile industry, on how you're working in an indie game like Raji, or even a big budget AAA game sector, you know how uh, how that keeps changing based on different goals. Like suppose if you're making a mobile game, that's mostly your numbers, right? Based on that, the how keeps changing, right? You keep reiterating over and over and over and
Yes.
over again.
Yes,
And
true.
that could be completely different in a different sector, like a AAA, which has a completely different goal. So that has requires a more steady uh, pipeline, or maybe not. Whereas an indie game
Right.
will have a completely different things. So if you could go from this and like kind of like shed more light on these things. I don't know. There was a
Yeah. So I
question.
mean, honestly, you have to remember.
Hmm.
The one thing to remember is that if you're making a game and if you're hoping to sell it, this whole operation is to start with a business, right? You have business, which so the business part of it is right up there or at the base of it, and on top of that comes a creative part. Okay, so if you look at all these big game companies, if you look at successful game companies, who calls the shots? The product team calls the shots. The marketing team calls the shots. There are these executives that make 60, 70 lakhs a year whose only job is to look at the market and figure out what's going to work, what people are going to play, what people are going to buy. Like they are the apex predators of the game industry food chain. Okay, so it's all about what works. If for example, if you have a successful game title, most studios work on a principle of 70 to 80% safety and 30% risk. So 70% of your resources and your time is going to go into making something that has a really low risk and a high chance of success. So it's going to be a reskin of an existing, or like a sequel of one of your games, or you're going to take a successful game genre from somewhere else and you're going to mix that with something. So 70% of your budget and your time, ideally, if you want a successful business, 70% of your effort needs to go into something that is low risk. Okay, and 30% of your resources and effort needs to go into making something fresh and new, which might be the next big thing, but it's probably going to crash and burn. So I told you I'm cynical because I've seen so much of this stuff that I realize who calls the shots. So that's essentially whether it's a mobile game, you're going to look at a mobile game and say, okay, what works? What's my competition like? So let me kind of take that kind of game and add some new art and add some new mechanics, and then release it to a limited audience, which is called a soft launch. So every mobile game is released to a small audience of people, and then you test it. There's analytics which will analyze everything the player is doing, like from moment to moment, and then they'll see, is this going to work? And if it's going to work, then they'll build on that. If it's not going to work, it's out. It's straight out. You know what I mean? Again, if you look at console game, if you look at mobile, which is why Cyberpunk 2077 is taking so long, because it's so new. Everything is new. Everything is brand new. It's stuff that hasn't tried, an art style, game, mechanics, everything is brand new. So they're not ripping anything off from anywhere.
The scope of the world is much larger and much bigger than anything that's been out there.
Yeah, the game, like everything is new. The art is new. The game mechanics, the scope, the narrative, everything is absolutely new. Try making a game which is like World War II fighting game or whatever. It would be done like that. You know what I mean?
Because
So
the concepts are already there. People have already done it. And even if you don't know coding and stuff, you can at least lay out the ideas in your head and like have a linear structure to it, right?
yeah, I mean, even the big game companies, man, the biggest game companies have the most to lose. So there's honestly there's not so much creativity and there's a lot of marketing. So the effort is, I would say, it used to be 80% creative and 20% marketing these days. Say 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Now it's 30% creative and 70% marketing.
Yeah.
Right.
I can't disagree. But going back to what I asked, generally you said like you have so much experience in teaching about video games. Has teaching about video games helped in your understanding of video games rather than in a different way than say when you were making a video game?
Oh, absolutely, man. Like I have to research so much stuff. So I went to a pretty good game college. Like I went to Vancouver Film School, which is I'd say among the top 10 game schools in the world. And it's a 1 year, very intense program. And I learned a lot of stuff there. But then once I got into teaching at Backstage Pass, for example, they never taught me player psychology. They never taught me operant conditioning, right? So I had to learn that stuff on my own. I had to go off and find out what a Skinner box is. I had to figure out operant conditioning. And then once I did that, I started seeing games differently. You know what I mean? So I would say I would never have been who I am today if I had not been teaching. Because so there's two things, right? Teaching is not just a one-way process in which you are transmitting information to your students. Your students are also transmitting information to you. That's a massive thing that most people don't realize. I don't have the time to play games. So whenever I'm hanging out or teaching a bunch of my students, I get a lot of exposure to video games and video game culture and game mechanics from them, right? So there's this, I've known people who have been out of the game industry for 10 years and are still teaching. And it's so stale, like their knowledge and information is 10 years outdated. For me, it works really well to be actually working in the game industry. I'm doing research about games and I'm playing games and I'm figuring out this. I read 10 to 12 hours a week. I have to research 10 to 12 hours a week for my teaching online, right? So I'm getting information from the internet. I'm getting professional experience from working on games, and I'm also getting to understand games better from the students that I'm teaching.
Right.
So it makes all the difference.
Right.
So again, this is a small topic again. Based on this, you said you've drawn inspirations from things. What most people in schools recommend is like you keep playing a lot more games to get design ideas. But for me, what has been happening is before games, I was more of a reader and a movie enthusiast as well. So somehow most of my design ideas are not really taken from games, but I always kind of get inspired more from books, right? Whenever I read books, I'm like, hey, if this game could, this books could, there is a formula here that can be made into a game. When I see a movie plot, I'm like, there is a formula. It's always working in me. There is a structure that is possible that works in a game. If you see something like Mandalorian, right? It's like that is designed like a game. The guy goes to one place, he wants something, the people give him a side quest, so he completes that side quest, and you can see there's a game developing there. So would you encourage people to go outside just games and gather inspiration from there to develop certain original ideas?
For sure. I mean, I don't mind admitting that I'm more of a reader than a gamer. Right. Myself, even though my entire, like I'm a game designer, my professionally I teach games, I eat breathe whatever teaching games, but I am more of a reader than I am a gamer. So I spend more time reading than I do playing video games, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Like, just because you make video games does not mean that you have to only consume video games. I would say read books, watch movies, travel, consume all kinds of media. You must, like, if you want to be up there, if you want to be really good as a game maker, and not just as a designer, as a programmer, as an artist, you need to consume media apart from video games. It's possible that you've been playing video games for like 5, 10 years and you're a hardcore gamer. Don't stop that, obviously, but make a conscious effort to explore other media, and other creative forms, because it will make your um, it will make you more creative. It will make you a more richer creative than if you just consume video games. 100%, 100%.
Right. This is a good place to segue into the next topic. So you said you're talking about how reading books and experiencing like basically other modes of entertainment, or consuming other forms of entertainment helps with game design. What's the basic advice? This is a common question. Okay, this is a question. Doesn't matter where I am. Someone will come and ask me in 6 months. Doesn't matter. Okay. If I'm even locked in my house in the pandemic, which has basically been happening since March, someone still asks me this question. How do you get into game design in India?
Dude, it's like, the answer to that is very, very simple. I'll be honest with you. You have to make a game.
See, that's the thing. That's the thing. Okay. Here's where I want to be more specific. I've said that. That's the basic advice that I think every game developer gives, right? But my question is more along the lines of, what is the path to take if they want to do it, in an ideal format, like, going into university, figuring out this is there like a career counseling thing going on at Backstage Pass, like, because in every other game development in India is probably one of the only places, only career paths, one of the few career paths, not only few career paths where your degrees don't matter much at all, right?
Yep.
It's very, very skill based.
Yes, true.
But I believe that's changing slowly, right? Previously, it was very skill based because they weren't game programmers, but they weren't game designers, they weren't game art experts, right? Today, with the advent of games like Asura, Raji, and so many others coming out as well, right? PC games, and there are games. The scope of games coming out from the country is also expanding.
Right.
Is there a more straightforward, linear paths people can take? Like, just go to Backstage Pass, apply, get out, placement. Placement is a big thing in India, I believe.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone looks for that assured kind of job. What is the process? What is the standardized process, I would say, to get into game development in India?
So that's a fantastic question, Aman. And the truth is that now the educational ecosystem is waking up to game development now. So I teach at VIT, Vellore Institute of Technology, Bhopal. So VIT has a bunch. There's a VIT in Vellore, obviously. Then there's a VIT in Bhopal. There's even a VIT in somewhere in Andhra Pradesh, and there's several VIT. So VIT Bhopal actually has a BSc in game development. Right. So which means that you can go and you can join. And to be honest with you, Indian parents, if you tell them I'm going to make games, they'll be like, "Abhi pagal ho gaya," they'll give you one slap kinds. But if you tell them like, "Papa, I'm doing BTech in game development," I
think the perspective has changed a little though. Like, I remember that conversation, right? If you want to say you want to get into game development, your parents are like, "What are you saying?" Right? It's like if you tell your parents you want to be a musician or like an artist in this India, like
even musicians, people know that what music is. People don't know anything about game
development.
I mean, parents still see that as like an IT job, right? I mean, but you know how the expression parents give, like if you tell them, you imagine like you're in school, you're class 9, and you're saying you want to be in a band or something and you want to devote
Yeah.
time to music, right? Yeah, the average Indian parent will be like, what? Study. That will
True.
not give you money. So yeah, I believe that perception has changed a little because
A little bit.
yeah, because of the advent of mobile game development and becoming a very big thing in this country, and this entire narrative of the game development game development industry in India becoming a $1 billion industry and whatnot, right? This has
Right.
gone slightly more mainstream. Even we have Prime Minister Narendra Modi saying things about PUBG, joking on, and I don't remember any other prime minister in this country talking about games, let alone joking about it in one of their speeches, right? And he has also said, this is the time when games in this country should be coming out from, right? All that. So I believe because of that top-down narrative or messaging change, right? Parents have still started to wake up to gaming, and there's also all these news about streamers, right? Streamers and influencers, which are becoming very big. Here's the thing: the reason why I said the narrative has changed is because my own mother. I've been in the gaming industry for some time, but my mom calls me up and is like, "Why are you not into game design?" And I'm like,
Interesting, really?
That's what I wanted to do 10 years ago. Okay, that's when you said no. And now you're asking me because Raji and all those have come up, right? 4G and stuff. So I think the perception.
Another reason for this might be that as volatile as game industry still is, like you can lose your job at the drop of a hat, but if you still compare it to the more artistic mediums like music and film,
Right.
there is still, I think, a corporate hierarchy in the game where I think you still have an employment contract of 6 months or stuff, and based on skill, your salary still has certain level of structure, I suppose. So as volatile as it is still a little more stable employment wise than the other artistic field. That's a very unique niche where game development fits between artistic and corporate, and I think gives it a
Yeah, man. I mean, like if you look at companies like big companies like EA, etc. I'm not an employee, so I can say like EA has a bonus program.
right.
EA has a fully corporate bonus program where you get like stock benefits, and like the guys there in all these AAA studios, they earn money which is not less than any corporate job. Like these guys earn well. They get their bonuses, they get their perks, they get to travel to GDC. Like it's good money, And if you see game companies now, in Bangalore, you have several in Hyderabad. It's serious stuff. Like they will give you a pension plan. They will give you food vouchers. They will even arrange for transport for you to come to work. They'll have insurance for your company. It's like serious. It's serious stuff now. It's not some niche thing anymore. It's like it's gone fully mainstream with all the benefits. So it's like a fully corporate thing now. It's not just like bunch of guys in a garage trying to make games. It's really the game industry has really gone mainstream now.
Yeah, so going back to that only, like how would one person secure a job there? Rather, not just secure, how would they understand? Because a lot of gamers don't even know when they say, I want to get into game development, like you also said. They don't have that idea of where they might fit in. So is there like career counseling and shit at Backstage Pass and other institutions?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this is what I do.
Okay.
Like I realized about 2-3 years ago that the whole game development scene in India is very, very mysterious, and there's no one you can talk to. There's nobody you can ask and say, hey man, like, how do I get into games? What's the process? Do I go to college? Do I start making a game on my own? Or like, what is the path of progress? How do you get into a game career? And to be honest, there is still no structured answer to this, which is why I've kind of started off this my whole up your game thing, which is basically game education and career mentoring, but that's something maybe we can talk about later. But honestly, the most structured path is to find a course in gaming. So I would recommend getting a degree out of school. You finish your school, and you kind of see if you can get a degree or BTech or BFA, which has a specialization in game making or game design or game development. And there are several of these. Okay, there are several of these courses. And once you're in that course, once you join that course, you will get exposure to the game industry. You will get exposure to people who know about the game industry. And you will, I can't stress enough that your biggest resource is going to be your batchmates.
Right.
That bunch of passionate people who play games, who are your friends, and who all want to make games. Right? So just getting in a room with 20 people who's say, I want to make games for a living, that changes everything. Because then things happen. You share knowledge, you share information, you collaborate on projects together, you get noticed. So just game making is a very, very collaborative process. Okay. And to be honest with you, like these days I see, I teach at college. So kids these days are, a lot of them have social anxiety, and they don't like to physically meet and get into groups and collaborate. I've noticed that a lot, and that holds people back. Okay. Individualism. And I'll tell you one more thing, frankly, that this whole solo dev thing is really romanticization of the solo dev is really hurting the game industry.
I mean, those are exceptions, right? Those aren't the norms.
Yeah.
Like solo dev, it's a one in a million.
Yeah, like this whole romanticization of the solo developer sitting in his room and turning out this $1 million game is really hurting people, because that happens literally 1 in a million. So
everybody wanted to be Mark Zuckerberg, like in engineering college, right?
Exactly. So game development is collaborative. You have to get together with a bunch of people and make a game. And that's essentially what game college is all about, right? So game college gives you that structure to actually get together with people and have mentors, hopefully mentors who actually know what they're doing, come in and teach you. Because otherwise, honestly, you can sit and you can go on YouTube and you can learn how to use Unity. You don't ever have to pay a dime because YouTube is there, right? But there's a lot, like I said, that 90% of the game dev triangle is not on YouTube. And that's below. And that's what you get when you meet people who are in the game industry.
Right.
I think the most important thing is also finding joy in the process, which even if you're making things alone, I'm a social guy, right? I don't find fun in doing things alone, right? And making any activity with the group, there's always fun in that process. And I think if you're not having fun in the process of the game, that kind of will show in the product as well eventually.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you get into a group that you gel with, not just in terms of work, but in terms of psychology, in terms of beliefs and stuff like that, and when you come to the product, the way Aman and I keep talking about Supergiant Games, and I keep telling him the story of how those guys were a group of friends who started a music band together. Was that or not? They eventually were like, let's make a game together, and they met another singer, and it's like the studio or the group of developers just organically came into being. And when you see that in the product, you can see it's a cohesive vision. Like they don't push technical boundaries, but they make a game that is so unique that you can tell that is a Supergiant game. And you can tell that inspired, because that in the end inspired the developers of Raji, which we found out, right? So that's where magic happens, right? Magic happens in the collaboration, in the fun of making things together. Ultimately,
you absolutely, man. In fact, before this podcast, I was thinking that I need to talk about that. And thank you so much for this, bringing it up. I think we would have missed it. Fun is one thing, but when you have an idea, if you're a creative, okay, if you're a creative and you come up with something that you want to make, and if you're in this bubble and it's just you, that's one thing. But if you take it and you bounce it off someone and you show it to someone who's genuine, who genuinely cares and you genuinely wants to help and say, hey man, this is what I'm thinking about. What do you think? That's another whole different brain, and that's another whole set of experiences, perspective. A different brain is going to look at your idea and possibly criticize it a little bit, but help you to make it better. So that whole bouncing off of a creation is absolutely crucial. And it's not just about, it's not necessarily fun. It can be very painful for creatives to come up with something and show it to someone else, and that person kind of tears it to pieces and says, dude, this is not going to work because boom, 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 boom. And you feel like someone's knifed you in the stomach because you have this idea and you have this thing that you made and you want everybody to say, oh my God, you are a genius. You're so smart. Can I kiss your butt? That's what you want. That's what you want people to say. But people who are going to help you are going to say, cool, but bum, 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 bum. And if you can put your creative ego to a side and listen, dude, you've fucking got it made. Like if you find someone like that, if you find a team that gels, if you have and I'm not kidding, I have seen 3 people that work really well together make something better than 50 people who have a shitty thing going on. You know what I mean? So it is like teamwork can exponentially be bigger than the sum of its part. Like a game team that works well together, that trusts each other, has good communication, can do insane stuff. Look at these Scandinavian studios, man. You walk into this, you look at their games and you'll be like, dude, this at least has 100 people working on it. And then you walk inside these Scandinavian studios and there are 5 people there. And you're like, where's everybody else? And they're like, it's just us. We made this. And you have studios in India, literally. I've been to Gameloft, man. And Gameloft is 2 floors of people just doing I don't know what. And you know what I mean? So that's it. You're very right. Is that this whole bouncing ideas of people in a team, and it's also it can be fun.
Right.
You're breaking off, Rahul.
You broke off completely.
I am?
Yes.
Okay.
The last 10 seconds were gone.
Okay. So I'll repeat that. So can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Cut. So the whole thing about game development is that it's a very, very collaborative process. You can have 3 people in a team that work very well, that get along well, have good communication and trust, can create something massive and beautiful and awesome. On the other hand, you can have 50 people all stuck in an office who don't really gel together, and they won't be able to create anything of that scale. So please remember, if you want to get into game development, that it's a very, very collaborative process. So try and be part of a team, learn how to work in a team, etc. And so the solo developer thing is seriously overrated. You can kind of go into the whole solo dev thing at some point.
But probably with a lot of experience.
You can even do it in the beginning, honestly. You can do it in the beginning. If you have nothing, if you're finding nothing, you're like, okay, let me do this on my own. And you can kind of bang your head against the wall and make a game, release it. And that will be a very good experience for you, for sure. But it's not the best way to start.
Right.
There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of pain. And there's a lot of
disappointment
right down that road.
I think that's a sentiment that whatever you said, that this is not a solo thing, this is like a team collaborative effort. That's been the sentiment that's been echoed by even Vaibhav and Avichal, who have been on this podcast before. They've said the same things, that game development is a very team player thing. And if you're not a team player, the end product kind of shows into that.
Right.
So just to end this topic, I want to ask one last thing. What kind of degrees does a place like Backstage Pass offer? Is like undergraduate, graduate,
Yeah.
PhD? I don't
So
know.
in India, I teach two. So at Backstage Pass, I teach BFA, that's Bachelor of Fine Arts in game something, and there's also a BTech in game development. So they have BFA if you're more into the game art spectrum, and BTech if you're more into the technical programming, etc. spectrum. So those are two general streams, and I believe that Srishti, Bangalore, where I also teach. So I'm teaching MSc. So there is a master's, not MSc. I'm not sure. I think it's an MSc or it's an MA or something, which is specialization in game design. Right. In India, right? But I do know of many people who have gone to the US and done a master's in game development as well. So I mean, the mecca of game making is obviously North America.
Do you need
right?
any prerequisite degrees to get into a place like Backstage Pass?
No. I don't think so. I'm not sure. I think maybe they have an entrance exam, but and you have to have a certain percentage or something like that to get inside. But I think if you pass your 12th, I think you can get in there. I have a feeling with a certain percentage. I'm not very sure. Probably call them up and ask them.
Right. I think that's about it. I think for this topic. So. Yeah, maybe we can move on to the next question and then towards the last thing and ask you about what games you're playing. But before that, I want to talk about specifically a game you've already made and published and put out some years ago. I believe it came out in 2017.
2016.
16, right. Please tell us a bit about that. I'll later on show some maybe gameplay over on screen for people to understand. Just give us an idea of that experience, how it came out, what's the reception and whatnot.
Sure. So in about 2014, I had been, like I said, I used to be in the Merchant Navy till about 2008, and then I quit, and I was in this whole new career. And then I joined Gameloft, right? And Gameloft, they were working on mobile games. So I interned at a game studio in Vancouver as a tester. And then I moved back to India and I joined Gameloft, and I was a game designer there. And initially we were making games for the Nintendo DSi, which was fantastic. It was really nice. But then in a year or so, they lost those projects and they moved me to a production role, to a producer's role. And I wanted to kill myself within 2 months. So I'm like, I'm not, so I'm like, there's no way I'm doing this production stuff. Like, I'm a designer. So I quit. And I started my own thing. And then ultimately what happened was that I kind of got into teaching as well, right? And so I really felt a need to make a game, right? I was like, I need to, this is what I'm born to do, is make games. So I want to make a game, right? So I had this idea in my head for a few years, that I had been building, and I just decided to kind of go for it. So I called up a couple of people I knew who were kind of like also from Backstage Pass, and I was like, hey guys, you want to make this? And they were like, okay. And I was like, cool. And then we just started making it. And looking back, I had made a game before that in 2012, which was for mobile. So the good thing about me is that I actually finished my projects. There are very, very few projects that I start that I don't finish. I abandon them if I think that they're not good enough, but it very rarely happens that I start it and I don't make it. So I made that particular game and I released it on mobile. And now I said, so I need to kind of take it to another level. I would like to make a more complex game. I would like to explore game design in much more depth, which is why we started making Bird of Light. I did not put a lot of player research into it. It was just something which I was making for myself, right? So the part where you do, who's going to play this game, I didn't really ask that question very well. I didn't answer that question very well, to be honest. And then we made that game. And then it took us about 2 years, me and a kind of like a friend, former student of mine, Sushil. He quit his job actually, and he did all the programming, I did all the design, and we found someone who did the art for us for a stake in the game, right? And we released it in 2016 on. It was actually supposed to be for mobile, but when we came close to the release, I kind of realized what a cesspool mobile was, and I kind of realized that the game was not going to do well at all in mobile. So at the last moment, we actually ported it over to Steam, and we even got a publisher for our game.
Right.
And we released it on Steam. That was fantastic, man. Making Bird of Light and releasing it was like it made me the game maker that I am, in the sense that that game has very, very, very deep design, right? And it gave me the confidence that I could do whatever I put my mind to it. So making that game, like, it didn't make a ton of money. It made a bit of money. It was fair enough. It didn't make a ton of money, but to be honest,
it broke even.
Oh yeah, it broke even. It broke even. It didn't make a ton of money, but the idea of that game was not fundamentally to make money, but was to really get my hands deep into my chosen discipline of game design, and in that way it worked really, really well for me. That gave me so much confidence that at this point I'm like, I mean, if I put my mind to it, I can pretty much do what I want. That game gave me confidence as a designer.
So is there like a new game coming?
So I've kind of shifted focus. I've realized that I'm very good mentoring people who make games rather than doing it myself. Right. So there is something coming up.
Okay.
And
it's from your studio?
Yes, it is, but it's a very different format.
Okay.
From anything that I think I would be bold enough to say that anything has ever seen before. I mean, that's a bold thing to say. Okay. And I'm revealing it next month.
Okay.
It's on my t-shirt, and I'm going to be revealing it.
You heard it here first, folks.
Let me just see the t-shirt nicely. It's something like teapot, but fine.
Can you see it?
Right.
Slightly, but yeah.
Yeah.
We'll have to get you here next month again then.
Yeah, man. It's something that, I mean, I don't want to I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. So it's something that I'm revealing next month. I'm working on it, and it's a very different format of making games than I think has ever been made before, and it's very interesting. So I'll get back to you on that.
I just want to ask like a vague question around it. You can answer it or not if you want to. Is it like a more mainstream type of game or more niche category?
It's not the type of game. It's the methodology of making the game.
Okay. I mean, that's fine, but as a gamer...
an RPG. It's an RPG.
It's an RPG.
It's a role-playing game. It's an RPG.
It's an RPG. Interesting.
Yes.
That's very interesting. Nice. I would...
it's a role-playing game.
I would be very interesting to see how that comes up. Yeah, nice. Nice to know that there's more games coming. I don't want to go away from this topic, but we're running out of time and we have to end this. But I just want to ask one more thing, which is, you published your game 2016. In 2020, the last 4 years, gaming has changed a lot in this country, I believe. Not just game development, but in general, how gamers are perceived, how gaming is perceived, how many gamers are there. And just the whole advent of the mobile game boom in the industry boom in this country, right? There's just esports is a viable career in this country now. It wasn't just 2 years ago. It wasn't a thing. 3 years ago, I even got you to Calcutta 3 years ago, I believe.
That was a crazy trip, man. Yeah. I remember that.
I got you to Calcutta to just give a workshop on game design in a college. I was testing waters. That went okay. Fine, but it was an experience, and but there's so much changed since then, right? I remember I bought the trip up because 3 years ago when I got you over to Calcutta to do like a game design workshop, people were barely interested. I'm being very honest here,
Totally.
and I knew I had an uphill battle to get people interested in that. But today I believe that will be completely flip side, right? There's just so many random people being like, oh, yeah, I want to learn how to make a video game. How do we make PUBG, right? What are your thoughts about that? Like, just what do you see in the upcoming future? You've been in the industry for like a long time now, right? Over a decade at least.
I mean, honestly, we need people. The game industry in India is short of good people. And it's one of the things that's holding the industry back is that there aren't enough good people. So there is huge scope. There is massive scope for games in India. A big thing that has changed recently is that Indians are actually spending money in games, right? And that changes everything. So the more money there is in the ecosystem of gaming, the more people are going to want to make games. So video games is definitely and I mean, okay, I'll tell you something. If you look at, I have the stats somewhere if you want to send it to you. So video games in 2018 became bigger than the movie industry worldwide, TV worldwide, and music.
You're talking about the overall global industry, right?
Overall global industry,
Yeah.
right? And we are very much plugged into this global industry.
Yes.
Okay, so we all plugged in. So making video games for a living is a wise career choice. Like parents don't know yet,
right?
But 5 years down, and I mean those are games which are not going to be lost to AI. Do you know what I mean? The design jobs, creative programming jobs are not going to be lost to bots.
Understood.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And not just gaming. There is a whole trend of gamification, which means that apps are being gamified. Education systems are being gamified. So when you say games, there is a whole system of gamification which is not directly video games, which is also part of the gaming ecosystem and the gaming career.
Just
right?
like for an example, the Cred app that you have, right?
Where
you get basic discounts based on certain games that you play inside, right?
Right.
There is a designated game design job that is specifically for that purpose. So you have many things outside games as well.
Right. Exactly. So what I'm saying is, if people want to get into games, there is no better time in human history than to do so now. However, with the caveat that it's serious business. It's not making games is not like playing games. Okay, it's very intense. It's very satisfying. And this is one thing I'll tell you: if you're making games for a living, I've done a lot of things. Making games for a living is a very special thing. It doesn't feel like work. You can, like, Monday morning doesn't feel like you want to go and work in Monday morning. You know what I mean? So it can be very fulfilling. It can be awesome, but it is serious work, right? And there is a structure behind learning it. So you can't take that lightly. Don't just jump in and be like, woo, this is going to be fun. I'm going to be playing video games all day. It's going to be awesome. No, there's a serious career in there for you if you want to make video games, but it's not all fun and games, but it's there.
Right. I think that's a fair answer. I just want to ask, okay, this is, I guess, towards the end of the podcast. Udit, if you want to ask anything, or if you want to say anything about the topic, please feel free. Otherwise...
No, I think in terms of fulfilling games, one really interesting experience that had me most fulfilling, it had nothing to do with my work. It was just some side ideas that we were running, right? Which made me realize a different way in which design works. Because normally, what people think of design is I make all the ideas and stuff, and then you send that to other people, and then they start building upon them. One interesting thing happened where one of my friends, like childhood friend, he made a lot of music tracks, right?
Hmm.
And an artist that I also know got inspired by those and made some concept arts, right? And through that, I got inspired to make some design ideas. So it went backwards, right? And I'm just and there's just like so what I want to stress is there's so many ways design can be approached. It can be forwards, but it can even come from the other side backwards. And I think it would be less if we think of ourselves as all knowing, right? Everybody who is part of in an ideal, in a great collaboration, everybody who is a part of the team will have some hand in design. And if we go with that mindset, I think we'll get the best games.
Yes, that's true. So I mean, in my teams, I have artists, I have testers, I have developers. So the general instruction that I give to my teams is that making this game, and especially when it comes to design, it's everybody's job. Okay, so please feel free to express your opinions on the experience of the game. It doesn't matter if you're a tester who just joined the studio 5 days ago. You have a right to talk. You have a right to express yourself, and we really will listen to you. Because I mean, it's not just a I'm a nice guy thing. The truth is that sometimes fresh eyes and a fresh perspective on the game is very, very valuable. You know what I mean? So everybody who touches a game, even the marketing people, right? Even the suits, the corporate people, sometimes give ideas. And like, dude, I did not think of that, and that really made the game do well. So yeah, that's a good point with it.
Gamers don't like marketing people getting into video game development.
Very easy to hate on the marketing people, but they do an important job of keeping everybody employed.
Man, I'm telling you, honestly, I work in my work. I see a page with maybe 10 or 20 games, and then I have seen games that have come on page one because somebody had a couple of beers with the marketing guys and got drunk and agreed, okay, we'll put your game on top. And it was like a really not such a nice game, but it was on top for a week. And that game made more money than you can imagine just because it was on top. So the day it was removed from the top, it kind of just it crashed and burned, but it made so much money just because it was on top of the app store.
It justified itself.
You know what I mean?
It justified itself within 1 week.
So in a market where there's so many games out there, your marketing strategy is everything. You can make a beautiful game, but if people don't see it, no one can play.
Right. No, it was just like an offhanded comment because I think we have all seen Ubisoft too much marketing in their game, where the game doesn't even look like the marketing material, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, we have seen those as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think we also need to make players available that even a game that feels like a copy of another game, there's still a lot of work that goes into it. It's not like a production of a movie where you're ripping things off, right? Even a game which looks like a reskin, they have different production goals, like kind of experiences they want to make, the way the load times are handled, the way
they'll make slight changes to the already existing variant.
The experiences that might not be very well upfront, but when you play it, you really, really notice it, because that's how different games are delivered. So despite things looking similar, there is still merit to a lot of games and the development processes. So I think as gamers, we need to be a little more empathetic towards that as well. Of course,
I'm in marketing. It was more like a self jab than anything else. Okay.
And so it's like, of course, there are certain things that are just cash grabs, but when it comes to these things, iteration and they eventually, like, it's a small process that keep leading to bigger and better things.
Right. Anyway, going to the last topic of the day, I guess. I hope you're not tired yet, Rahul.
No, I'm good, man. I'm enjoying this. It's nice to hang out with you.
Nice.
And talk games and game making. It's fantastic. I could do this for hours.
Speaking of talking about games, this is the last topic, and this is like a tradition in this podcast. At the end, we basically, it doesn't matter who it is, since this is like a gaming podcast, despite the name, we want to talk about games. Like, what games have you played recently, this week? Generally, we talk about this week games.
Sure. So essentially at this point in my life, I'm playing two games, and the first one will surprise you. It's poker.
Okay.
So I've actually become something of a serious poker player in the last 5 years. Because
That's a long
I'm all
time.
about.
That's not recent. That's like 5 years. Is
Yeah.
like you're a competitive
Yeah, yeah.
esports player at this point.
Unless you're an elf, that is a really long time.
Yeah, like honestly, I joined the casino game industry,
Right.
and the first thing that they did when I joined my company is that in the you have this familiarization. They got us into a room and they opened up a box with poker chips and poker cards, and they taught us poker. They taught us how to play poker for our company familiarization, right? And
Nice.
it was fantastic. And so then I got an app and I started playing poker online, and now I'm hooked, man. So I play a lot of. I guess at this point in the pandemic, so then I started actually going to people's houses and getting into poker games, and it turns out that I'm pretty good at poker, and I play a lot of online poker now. So that's one of the things I really enjoy doing because it's purely skill. Poker is a pure skill game, and I'm all about skill games. So that's the one thing that I do a lot. And the other thing that I've actually been playing Hades.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Honestly, because I'm more of a shooter guy, MOBA guy. So I used to play a lot of Overwatch, right? And then I just kind of stopped playing. I didn't have time, and then everybody was talking about Hades, and I believe it or not, I never played a roguelike.
Okay.
I never played a roguelike. So I'm like, dude, I have to play Hades. And then I download and I start playing it. And I have this whole thing when I teach, it's called finding the fun. So it's possible that you may start with a game genre and you may start playing it. And you're like, dude, what is this? I don't get this game. So in the beginning, to be honest, I started playing Hades. And I'm used to just like walking around with a rifle shooting people. And here you have to change stuff and you have to remember controls and there's so much to remember.
It's very skill based.
By the Super Giant games who I was talking about earlier.
I know exactly. So I was like, I have to play this game. And then I was playing it on PC with a keyboard, and I was like, oh God, this is like I'm not having fun. And then I was on a call with one of my students at Srishti. Okay. And I was ranting. I was like, dude, like, I really want to play Hades. I want to have fun, but I'm not. And he's like, how are you playing? I said, I'm playing on a PC. He says, try using a controller. And then I did that. And then, boom.
Yeah, the controller mapping is really good for their games.
I know. I started playing it with my controller, and it was a different game. Like, it was like I started playing it with a controller on my laptop, and now I'm loving it. It's like, it turns out that for me, it's much better to play it with a controller. It completely transformed the game. So now I don't get to play much. I play like 30 minutes after all the kids have gone to sleep, maybe twice a week, but I'm really enjoying it.
How many hours are you into the game?
Oh, I must be an hour and a half. I think I've played like 20 minutes. So I'm like an hour and a half into the game. And I die a lot, but now I'm starting to enjoy it. I'm really starting to enjoy it now. And it's not just that. Now I look at it from a narrative point of view. I look at it from the sound. I look at the sound, I look at the sprites, and sometimes I just like pause again. I'll be like, how the hell did they do that?
That's the thing. About Hades previous episode, and I think
in the last 3 episodes we've been talking about Hades.
We've been talking about Hades every episode, and one of the things is like the reason I have not been able to get roguelike is because I place narrative very highly on the kind of games I want to play, and roguelikes generally by design. It's very hard to form a very coherent narrative structure in a game where the whole concept is dying and like playing. And the way Hades has tackled it is so brilliant, right?
It is.
Narratively and gameplay, there is such good and strong thematic tie-in with that.
True.
That just makes it such an alluring, unique experience.
I know. It is brilliant, man. It is really brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm having such a good time.
I specifically want to talk about the art style. I just find it so interesting that they took like a Greek mythology and that put like a Mexican art style on it. The only other game that I can remember which has a very similar art style to Hades right now is the one game that instantly came to my mind when I booted up that game was Guacamelee, which was like a platformer, right? And it had that whole Mexican style, bright colors. And this game, it also has bright colors, but it's very contrasted, right? It's just a lot of black and red. And it's bright, but it still has the dark vibe. And the narrative of the game, it's just so interesting. The game feels. I think Skill Up is a reviewer. They said they put a headline. I think that describes it very accurately. Polished to a level of like another level, like basically.
I know. That is polish, man. You play that game, and the level of polish on that game is legendary.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just fantastic. It's just a visual. Even when you die, it's a nice experience.
Yeah.
You know, it's so beautiful when you die and you respawn. It's like, oh, you know. You know?
I think this is again what I was going to tell. You can tell it is made by a group of people who really passionately believed in a coherent vision together, right? And came together to make that. Because if you think, when you think about the Supergiant games here, they're not going to be pushing technical boundaries like this is going to be the biggest graphical powerhouse. They're not going to push like this is going to be the best gameplay ever been seen. You know, like the most complex gameplay you're going to see. But every game of theirs, just like you see in Studio Ghibli animated movies, right? Every game of theirs, when you go and play, you're like, this is a Supergiant game, right? This is something that is so unique to a particular company that is like a brand identity.
Yeah. You know, you're just waiting for the next one to come out, you know?
Oh, yeah. For sure. I've been a fan of... The only Supergiant game I haven't been able to go and get into, Pyre, is because it's so different. It's like a football game with narrative, and I'm like, no, too much. And like,
I think that's when they realized like we went too far.
No, I think there is definitely a niche for that as well, for sure, because it did get a lot of positive reviews and stuff, and
it's amazing. You can actually do that. Think of how fantastic it must be to just wake up and say, you know what? Let's try making that. And people were like, let's do this. You know? So that must be amazing.
Right. I just want to mention like what you said about how, even Udit said, how it doesn't punish you for dying, because in a lot of games, like generally if you're playing, like I know a lot of people who do not have a lot of time and they're also playing games, even Udit including, right? Whenever you die, you're like, okay, I'm done, right? I'm done for the day. In Hades, you die, you're not done. You want to hear the dialogues and then you're done.
Like, exactly. So it gives
hook after something.
It gives some perspective to your death. It makes your death. I think that has a lot to do with the fact of the narrative of the mythology that it's baked into, which is that death is something temporary. Death is a part of life. Like you die and you respawn and you get a chance. It's this whole reincarnation thing that works really well. That death is not the end, and so you don't really feel so bad. It's not such a bad experience when you die. You know, and I think that's one of the things that all these ancient cultures, and that is also one of the things that Raji has, that it's baked into this mythology. It's baked into this deep culture that gives meaning to gameplay, which is beyond just completing a challenge or finishing something. You know, it gives a deeper value to your experience than just that of the video game. You're learning something new culturally. while you're playing the game. You're broadening your cultural horizons while playing a video game.
Of course, yeah. I can't state how much I've learned by just playing video games. Assassin's Creed, where I think a prime example every gamer can give for learning history, right? What have you been playing, Udit? How has your week gone by?
So again, I went back to the game that got me interested. So if I didn't tell you this, but after 2008 to 2013, I had completely lost interest in video games. Firstly, because it was my studies, etc. And then when I got a PS4, that was where my interest started getting back. And I got a PS4 for this one game. It was The Last of Us, right? So just when I heard yesterday that The Last of Us TV series is officially into production, right? And I got to know who all are involved. It's the director of Chernobyl, it's the producers of The Wire and Sopranos. It's like the big boss of HBO are coming to make this. I got hyped again, and I was like, I need to play this again. And I'm like, how much would my experience have changed now after 7 years? Does the game still hold up? I probably will not cry in the first 20 minutes, right? And I booted the game. First 20 minutes, I was like,
right.
It still holds up, man. It's like, when you tell about people like to make fun of the game, saying, oh, it's a cinematic experience, oh, it's not really game. Play that game. I am honestly telling you, like, the way there is so much detail, even the motion capture, everything. It was the thing that made me stop thinking of characters as vessels for you to navigate from point A to point B, but you could feel every emotion of the character and the motivation for why you want to go from there, and even the moments in between. There's just the starting moment where you go from point A to point B, and the little interactions that you have with them, right, fills so much gap. And that is something I'm wondering how the TV series is going to get it right, because there is so much narrative moments in the gameplay actions that happen, right? That is something we might miss out on the TV series. That's something you want to find out, and it's interesting. And now, as somebody who's gotten more into writing and who's gotten more into design, right, I'm able to see the intricacies of how the motivations are playing out and how they were set up. Game's a fucking masterpiece, dude. Like, that's
Yeah, man.
Last of Us 2 might actually transition better into TV show than the game itself, though. I just want to say, because of the middle transition, right? The jarring transition. Because we've already seen a lot of TV shows and movies where they give like dual, like a protagonist and an anti-protagonist, like what's the word? Anti-hero has going simultaneously forward in the story, and their motivations are coming out. I guess you can't do that in video games other than just switching between characters, right? And how Last of Us did it was very jarring, because at the middle of 20 hours it just gave you another character and be like, go forward, right?
I agree completely, but I also agree that the effect it had might not be the same the TV series, and I'll tell you why. The entire spoilers for The Last of Us 2, everybody knows it by now. So the thing is the whole concept of that game was to create empathy with people from perspectives you don't know, right? And that's the thing, right? You are on you're basically on such a hell-bent revenge path in the first one, and you have the perfect motivation, right? Like, the guy that you played in the first Last of Us dies in the first 20 minutes, right? And not just dies in the most brutal way, right? And so again, from a design decision, that makes so much sense. You need a motivation for you to go to the end point. And what is the biggest motivation unless you emotionally feel that, right? And what's the best way to emotionally feel that? You kill one of the most beloved characters in the entire franchise, right? And you kill him in a brutal way, and that's a revenge quest. Immediately everybody's on board, right? And when the situation happens, you flip it, and now you're playing as the killer. And I can understand how jarring it is, right? But then the structure of that killer is the same as the structure of the character in the first game. And now you're like, okay, so this is just the same thing from a different. And till the end, I was still not on board. I'm like, no, fuck, she killed Joel. Like, I don't give a fuck about that, right? But it was interesting. You have two boss fights with the same characters, right?
Right.
Ellie and Abby. The first time you play, you fight that. You know, again, you have how many games you've had where boss fights are just people you have to kill, right?
Right.
Where boss fight. But the first time it was like a boss fight was I was Abby and you want me to fight Ellie, right? You want me to fight the character that I've spent 1.5 games with. You want me to fight that character? I'm not doing that, right? Fuck no, I'm not fighting that. Kill me so many times. Can you give me an alternate ending? No, I have to fight that. Okay, I have to hit that punch. Oh, this hurts. Oh, please, I don't want to do this. Like, how many times have you had that kind of emotional reaction? And then when you get control of Ellie, right? And then you fight Abby, the second boss fight, and it is brutal. And then you're choking her after learning her perspective. You're choking her down, and you're like, "This is too much." Listen, I know I didn't want to kill Ellie, but this is too much as well. I know this hurts as well. What the fuck? I'm mind fucked, right?
Yeah, mindfuck is the right word.
Yeah, like that's a crazy experience that I think only video games can give. While I do agree it'll transition better, but I do agree there is a value in the shock and jarring. I don't think Last of Us 2 is a 10 out of 10, but what it does, very few games have done. And
I don't think there has been any other game that what it does.
Yes.
So,
Right.
have you
And
also played?
I hope that what after the cry and the dust has settled, I hope that people learn the entire concept of empathy that it wanted to teach, right?
I mean,
And
it will
I
become
am
a cult
glad that
following eventually.
however, I'm glad that a video game has reached this point, right?
Right.
Like when you saw that, you're like, "Fuck, video games are here now," right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Have you also played Last of Us or Last of Us 2, Rahul?
Me, I played The Last of Us a while ago. I think it was
Oh my God,
quite a while ago, and I haven't played The Last of Us 2. No.
I'm so sorry I gave you spoilers.
No, that's okay, man. I'm probably never going to be the list of games that I have wanted to play but have not been able to play is so long that even if I start playing them now, I would probably be 100 years old till I finish playing them.
But
So that's all right. I'm quite used to it.
Take the game from a design perspective, just for that reason. If you could just play, it
I
and maybe
will. Let me. Maybe on the next podcast, if we get together, I will.
we should.
I'll
We should
give you.
actually-
I'll add a game to your list of backlogs. If that game has
Done.
technically not come out, okay. I want you to watch it and tell me later on. Okay, this game is called Beyond Good and Evil 2. It's by Ubisoft.
I've seen the
God
trailers.
complex, right? You were
I have
talking about God
seen the
complex and guilt.
trailers. Oh my god, I've seen the trailers, and I show those trailers in my class all the time, even though I haven't played it or whatever. And it looks just so fantastic.
You know the story, right?
Yeah.
Do you know the basic premise of Beyond Good and Evil 2?
No.
So I'll just I'll humor you for a little bit. Basically, what happens is that is not Earth, right? That is another solar system, and that is a solar system where old Earth was basically dying, climate change, blah blah blah. They needed to transport the human population to other planets to sustain life and whatnot. So they put out a lot of arcs, like big ships with a lot of people in it. This particular solar system, the arc that landed in this solar system was only filled with Chinese and Indian people. Okay. And it was filled with, the main captain was a Hindu founder. So the person who came, like the main leading in charge of this solar system that we play Beyond Good and Evil 2 is the main guy who was a Hindu founder who found the place called Ganesha City, where there is a big Ganesha statue and everything, and it's,
Right.
And so that entire culture around that entire solar system is a mix of Hinduism with Chinese text
Confucianism.
and not Confucianism. No, there is no Chinese mythology or religion as much as
It's just
there is-
language.
yeah, it's the language or the architectural style, whereas the Hinduism is more on the spirituality, and it's not the lifestyle that is being adopted from Hinduism. It's very specifically the spirituality and the deity worship and whatnot around that, right? Only
Right.
It's just a little bit parts. It's not pure Hinduism right there, right? It's not even
Right.
pure Chinese there. Right? It's just a mix of both things, and which is where the entire premise of that game. And I don't know if you've seen this film. It's called Treasure Planet. It's a really old Disney film that unfortunately Disney killed itself, right?
Oh,
Because there's a big story around that, but because the art style and the animation and everything was very costly, basically, to say it, and so Disney basically decided to slowly kill it off. But the story is basically about space pirates trying to find space treasure and all that, and this game follows a very similar line of path, and it's also mixing that entire Hinduism and all those things, and it's just so brilliant. I can't wait to play it. I
Talking
think
about God complex,
Yeah.
like the entire solar system there is simulated. Like the movement of the sun there will change the climate of that planet, and the rotation of that planet might cause some craters. And once if there's a crater formed, there will be people that will gather around to harvest those craters. The imagination of the game is next level.
Oh, yeah,
That goes
yeah.
against Ansel's design philosophies and his beliefs, right? Because we've noticed all his games had something to do with wildlife and these
Nature.
Disney kind of creatures like this. He was very the world always felt alive, and we kind of realized what the reason for that. Now he's completely quit games, and now he's like, I'm making a wildlife sanctuary,
Right.
Great.
So
Yeah.
that
So
kind of goes to
so the
show.
game is probably coming out next year, I believe. If not next year, it should be out by 2022 early. It's either coming out next year around holiday seasons like November, December, or early 2020.
I will put it on the list of games that I'm probably not going to play, but hopefully.
I think
should
you
do-
will particularly enjoy it because of the entire structure and the premise of the game in general, right? I have seen Wakanda, I've seen like Afrofuturism, I've seen like Blade Runner stuff. I've never seen anything like that's Hindu.
Yeah, just the
futurism.
trailer was so intriguing. I remember. So anyway,
Yeah,
I think we
that's
should do this. We should like take a game and probably like pick it apart sometime. Have these podcasts with you on
Oh,
board
for
again.
sure.
yeah, man, we should play the game and then just talk about it. Right.
Yeah. There's so much more we had. Like, thank you for joining us. I have not been playing a lot of
Thank you
games.
so much. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. I've had such a good podcast today. Thank you so much for having me. And hopefully, in fact, I want to invite you, Aman, onto mine. So I've started a podcast on my YouTube channel, Up Your Game as well.
Yes.
So I think I would definitely want to have you there in the next month or so. So I think that'll be interesting.
Of course. So for anyone who's listening or watching this, I'll put Rahul's YouTube channel in the link below. He puts out a lot of game development related videos and podcasts. He recently interviewed Anshul Soni, who's like one of the developers behind Star Wars Squadron, and he started out in India, is working over there now. So there's a lot of interesting stories to be heard over in his podcast.
And there's just one more thing I wanted to say. So what I've done is I've actually made something called a game career guide. It's a PDF which is about 38 pages long, and so I get a lot of questions about game development, about getting into the game industry. Right. So what I've done is over the last six months, I've had this project and I've actually created a game career guide, which is 36 pages of advice, information, tips. How is a game made? Like, what is the game development process like? So I've collated all that information. I've even done research on universities all over the world and in India that have games, and I've put them in there.
Right.
So it's 36 pages and it's free, right? So, it's a free giveaway. So anyone who's watching this, I mean, if you want, I can give you that link, and like it's for free. I'm giving it away because I want people, to join the game industry. So that's something that I have that you can, anybody watching the podcast can just ping me and I'll send it across.
If you have a link, I'll put it in the description as well. So
I'll send you the link.
Yeah. So description, it will be there, right? This comes out Tuesday. So yeah. But thanks for joining. It was very entertaining, very enlightening to listen to your story about, how teaching video games. I mean, like I said, I don't know a lot of video game teachers, mentors, so it's been very enlightening to hear your perspective on the entire industry and how the entire story basically. So yeah, thank you for coming on board.
Thank you, man. Thank you. It was very entertaining, and I hope everyone enjoys watching it. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah.
Great.
For those of you who are listening or watching this, we'll be back again next week, Tuesday. Again, we have nowadays, if you've already noticed, we are doing a slew of guests, which will probably continue for the next 10 or so episodes, because we are trying to build our network with these people, amazing people like Rahul, Avichal, Vaibhav, and others, so that we can do even more interesting podcasts in the near future, where we can get these people in a single panel and discuss more interesting stuff. Maybe just rant about Cyberpunk and Ubisoft because they stole my 15 euros. Otherwise, yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching this on YouTube. Do subscribe, share, and all that. And yeah, thank you.